for questions and answers. I'll take a couple, and then people can reply to it. If you have a specific question for someone, please do tell the name, and otherwise you can address the panel. So,
yeah. Sorry, instead of question, it is a comment.
Please.
And I was listening to the all presentations. Thank you very much, EFSAS, for this is very, very important. Basically, phenomenon happening globally, and we all will be impacted, the globe. And there were some excellent presentations, so thank you very much. I was listening the presentation of Syed Alam Masood. I feel really very deeply saddened because Sindh was completely missing. So therefore, it is my duty to talk about the impacts of CPAC on Sindh. Now, as Mr. Masood said, that the large chunk, almost 65% of CPAC are the energy projects. That is 34.5 billion. So we rounded up to 35 billion. Now, out of these 35 billion energy projects, the 70% of these energy projects, they will run on the coal-fired power projects. And in these the coal-fired power projects would make the 70% of the energy projects of the CPAC. 90% of the coal will come from nowhere, but it comes from the Thar, the Sindh area, the area of Sindh, which is called Thar. Now, coming to Thar. Thar coal that produces the 70%, because 90% of coal that comes from Pakistan to fire these plants that come from Sindh. And this Thar, because Sindh that produces 72% of gas of Pakistan, 56% of oil of Pakistan, the 5th or 6th largest coal deposits in the world, which is worth $23 trillion. And in that Sindh, the multi-dimensional poverty, according to the United Nations Food Organization, is over 70%. So this is multi-dimensional poverty. It's not poverty only by money. It's poverty by education, by health, by access to drinkable water, and all these social indicators. But within that, there is a variation. There's a rural-urban divide, there is regional variations. From where the Thar coal that fires the 70% of the power projects of CPAC, that multi-dimensional poverty in that district of Thar is 82%. Number one. More than 60% of the children under the age of 5 are stunned. And what we mean by stunned? Stunned means when their growth is less than 50%, what their normal weight should be. Now, as a result of this, because there is no royalty, nothing goes, there was no environmental impact assessment carried out, there was no consent from the local people, and as a result of this, because at least neither China nor Pakistan, they've got any concern about environment, and as a result of the human rights, therefore, the waste from these power plants, they have polluted the water streams, they have polluted the air, the prevalence of tuberculosis. We do not have any definite proof of it, but prevalence of tuberculosis has increased in these areas. The gastrointestinal problems have increased. In that area, which fires the 70% of the power projects of Pakistan from Thar, on average 2,000 to 3,000 children under the age of 5, they die as a malnutrition. Then secondly, because after the Gwadar, Karachi is currently the only viable and working seaport, and that is Sindh. Karachi is Sindh. And they try to, because there are about 26 or 27 islands, and for their geostrategic reasons, China wanted these islands, and the marine forces of Pakistan, they went there to vacate these, and there were big fight and all that. So it's really very important that people of Sindh are one of the first effectees as a result of this CPAC, because currently because the Gwadar is still in the process of development, all these containers from China are coming from nowhere, but they're coming to the port of Sindh, which is Karachi. And therefore, and then very, very interestingly, the workforce that work in the third extraction of coal, the Sindhi population that gets job there is only 23 or 26%, I'm not sure. The rest is from other provinces of Pakistan. What is our crime? And with such a severity, I was really, really severely saddened. I do believe it that Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Gilgit-Baltistan, they all are impacted. But how someone can forget the sin? So this is really very saddening. Now we in Sindh, because there is a huge movement, and we don't call it China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, we call it China-Punjab Economic Corridor. It is vice versa, because this economic corridor is not only economic corridor, it is a geostrategic corridor. It will have huge geostrategic implications in future. Likewise, the Punjabi establishment, they want to use this to reinforce their strategic position, to make the control more severe on Sindhis and other nations. Therefore, Sindhi people have completely rejected it, because sometimes if you see our banners, which are very, very maybe rhetoric, they say CPAC is a death warrant for Sindh, therefore we reject it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I think it's Mr. Said Alam's speech was focused on indeed Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Gilgit-Baltistan.
I can address
and
this.
Balochistan. And yeah, I'll just take a few more questions, then you can.
Yeah.
Please.
Hello.
Yes.
My name is Barna Igan from King's College University, and my question was directed to Mr. Jenny. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. And my question was, there has been claims of G7 investment plans to rival the BRR fundings, but for the past few years, maybe it's my ignorance, but I haven't seen anything materialize significantly yet so far. But there's been talks that have been continuing for years, and I was curious, how does the Labour government believes that they can, the West can replace China as the main funder of these developing nations, while they have a significant aim and a moral code on making sure these trade and the fundings will be not going to corrupt elites, while in this case, how does Labour government believes that they can make sure that the elites won't be preferring Chinese investments, which they can take some to their pockets, and not and replace it with Western ones, which they can't.
I'll take one more, and then we'll go to the panel to answer something. You have been waiting for. Sorry, I'll come for the next one. Please.
Yes, it's first, I'm very pleased with all the speakers, and particularly I was very pleased with listening to your starting remarks in terms of referring to the human rights issue, making reference to the outside what's happening about Palestine and Xinjiang. But I think similar things are happening in Pakistan. And it's not now, it's since 1947 to date, with Pashtun, Baloch, Afghan, and particularly Sindh as well. Sindh is not apart from us. Where, and I think like my friend Dr. Sadalam said, he can comment on it himself. I don't want to say anything about that. He can comment himself on that. But we are same in that issue. And in terms of coming back to the Labour Party, which I'm a member of the Labour Party since 1970, and I love Labour Party, but not the one which we call it Labour, and now like there's no difference between Labour and Conservative. we want Labour as a Labour Party based on the Labour philosophy. And up till now, even the Labour Party didn't mention anything in terms of Afghanistan issues and those issues. While we're talking about China, like I think Pieman mentioned indirectly, working within the mouth of Pakistan. Whatever, China and Pakistan are working together on the issues. Therefore, China cannot say openly anything than what Pakistan, and behind the curtain, Pakistan is supported by the British as well as America as well. So we don't know what's happening. But in the end of the day, the human rights issue, like you mentioned, to me, Palestine, and to me, Israel is equally important. Israel is in fact more important for me because I'm a Muslim, so-called Muslim you can call it, agnostic, but to me, if some of the fanatic Muslim you take it, they could engulf the whole of Israeli Yehudis because they call the Yehudis their bitter enemies, and they say destructive enemies from this world. So but equally to me, Palestine, they are the same Bani Israel. And again, we Pashtun, Afghan, Baloch Pashtuns are Bani Israel. I don't know why everything is happening in the world with the Bani Israel. To me, sometimes I call probably the Christians culprits. They are doing against that to fight us between we together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Tamani just left at the right moment, I guess. Just to clarify, and then this is not a Labour Party event. I am not, and neither is James here to defend the Labour Party's position. This event is organized by EFSAS and it is co-organized by the Labour Party's Foreign Policy Group, which is an independent academic group.
Yes.
But
Yeah, but
rightly said so. So I would like Dr. Saeed Alam and James to quickly comment, and then we can take another round of questions. So please, if you can keep it both short, please.
First of all, thank you very much. Our friend, what he mentioned was not wrong at all. My second book on CPAC is named as China-Punjab Economic Corridor. The second thing was of the share of sin. I mentioned that 17.07% of the budget is spent to connect Punjab with 3 ports. And I mentioned it. I should have mentioned Sindh as well. The third reason is that, third point in regard to your question was that probably I should have mentioned Sindh as well. The reason is that interior Sindh suffered a lot. And Karachi port, no doubt for Karachi, a circular railway has been awarded through CPAC in the 6th GCC. And that was only because of the activity of your Chief Minister. It was wonderful. You did very well. Though it has not been materialized, so Sindh is getting all because Punjab getting connected to Karachi port and Port Qasim and to Gwadar, getting all the 3. The rest I agree with you. Thank you.
James, there was, I think, a question there.
Yeah, thank you for the question. As the Chair said, the Labour Foreign Policy Group is not the Labour Party. We don't speak for the party. And I think Catherine would appreciate me making policy on behalf of the Labour Party as we sit here. Your question was around these sort of G7 competitors to the Belt and Road Initiative, and I was sat here trying to remember the names of the various initiatives that have been declared over the years. I think we had the Build Back Better World in 2021 after the G7. We had the Clean Green Initiative, which I think was one of Boris's ideas that went somewhere. And yeah, you are right, they do appear to have gone nowhere. And my hope for a Labour government, as I said in my opening remarks, would be to develop a system of projects which are focused on local need and focused on equitable partnership. Obviously the UK can't necessarily compete with China on its own, so cooperation with sort of like-minded countries may be one way to do it, but also cooperation with non-aligned countries, with countries that don't necessarily buy into the democracy, Western liberal values story. The UK is a regulatory superpower in many ways. You have a lot of foreign companies hoping to win contracts in London for the prestige of doing so. And I think that regulatory power, that appeal, that reputation for high standards is a big part of our sort of charm, as it were, in international development projects. In terms of fear of funding going to elites, yes, this is a big problem that I don't necessarily have all the answers to as we sit here. But I think there's something in the International Aid Transparency Index, for example, that's a framework for measuring the transparency of official development assistance funds. And that could be a potential method for ensuring that less sort of traditional aid-driven projects and infrastructure development projects could be monitored for their transparency. So yeah.
Thank you, James. I'll take two questions. You will take that person in the grey coat was waiting a while, and then after that I'll take you and then another one. Please. I think you raised your hand. Did you raise your hand? Yeah, please.
Aidan Starrock Foundation. I wanted to ask, on your question, what's one kind of policy answers and alternatives? Because I think we've outlined a lot of the kind of issues with China's expansionism. So how do we counter this? And it wouldn't be fair to ask that and not put one forward in increasing perhaps the World Bank's leverage or the ADB. I'm keen to hear others' thoughts.
You have raised your question.
Hi, Priyajit Debsakar. I work on Bangladesh and India. And my question to the panel is, we haven't really heard about Maldives and the recent political elections there because we're discussing South Asia, very important. And then if you also want to touch upon Myanmar, we didn't hear much, especially let's say about the Kayakpo port, which is part of the BRI initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. One more, please.
Thanks for your presentation. I'm from SOAS Center. I'm the research associate at Center of Taiwan Studies at SOAS. So I've got like one more question. So because I think China's economic engagement has been widely discussed, but in terms of economic power, as is any concerns about how China make use of BRA project to address its soft power in terms of religious or cultural exchange? I think it's also important, but it's rarely noticed. In this panel. So I just have this question.
Okay. I'm just looking to Fermana. We have there's no scope for extending this to 5-10 minutes, or do we
might
really?
get kicked out, it depends. Because Parliament closes around 9:30.
Okay, so we'll try 10 minutes.
Yeah. We'll try to push it by 10 minutes, but then if someone comes in,
8:40 we stop. Okay, as the boss says. So three questions. One is, of course, I think we can take that as a last question. How do you counter this? You of course mentioned Maldives, Myanmar. The panel can reply, but I would say there are so many issues in South Asia. You can't fit that into one. But whoever wants to take this question, the first one in the BRI.
I read about some projects in Maldives.
Yeah, let the panel first reply. Anyone wants to take any of these questions? How do we counter this, and the Myanmar and the Maldives issue?
I think sometimes more than even Pakistan, the Myanmarese dictatorship is completely in lockstep with thinking in Beijing, because both are, at the end of the day, police states. It suits them to support each other, which they do. Yangon's armaments, I would say up to 95, even 10% is supplied by Beijing and has been done so since the late 60s. There is also a signal intelligence post just off Sitwe Island, Coco Island, which Burma has leased to Beijing since the early 80s as a listening post, which is bang across as the crow flies to the Bay of Bengal, where India's space station Cape Canaveral is actually based on the eastern coast. And the Chinese make noises about trying to get people together and solving things, just like with Iran and Saudi Arabia we saw just now recently, which is not going anywhere, but that's another discussion. But likewise, they try to make forays with the Rohingya issue and have a three-way talk by bringing Burma and Bangladesh together. It's not gone anywhere. Nothing's come of it. Beijing does talk the talk to an extent, but it doesn't want to get too involved in anything. And I speak as someone who does actually Middle East studies, is that it refuses, the reticence is there because it doesn't want to be in a combat of entanglements with all these people. As far as it's concerned, it would like to see things panned out so that it can do business and commerce with all. And speaking of business and commerce, that's the hypocrisy of the Muslim world at large, who has bought into Beijing's explanation on the Uyghur issue that this is a security problem we are actually facing. And most of the Sunni Arab world have actually bought into this, what is purported as abuses which are genuinely happening in Xinjiang. And the Iranians, when you read Persian sources, have also bought into the fact, which they would now because they're in hock to Beijing, that these are, as they say for ISIS, takfiri elements, heretics and extremist Sunnis who are conducting terrorist campaigns in Xinjiang. So you do see that hypocrisy and quite frankly mendacity across the Muslim world in buying into Beijing's explanation because they all want to do business. The Saudis, the Emiratis, so on and so forth. So that pretty much sums it up.
I just want to come back to the question around how do we challenge, how do we counter this? And I think what didn't help is the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. I know I've said that when I spoke. But you actually need a check and balance system in South Asia, and you currently do not have that. When you have Russia focused on its war in Ukraine, it's distracted, and you have the West focused now on Israel-Palestine, on Ukraine, and also withdrawing from Afghanistan. It's basically left this space, open space for China basically to do whatever it kind of wants to do. And I think in order for us to counter some of that, we need to have active engagement with the countries in the region, not only around helping them cooperate on some of the economic stuff, but we should be doing more around aid, infrastructure, trade, development, those types of things to try and counter some of this negative impact that China has in the region. We could be doing more to help Sri Lanka, for example. We could be doing more to help Pakistan, for example, on its loan debts to China, for example. So there's loads of things that the West, in its sense, could be doing, but it's not doing because it's not focused on that at the moment. It's got other things to deal with, and maybe this is a strategic thought of the West. They want to move away from that region because they want to focus elsewhere. And I think that maybe this is about, forward thinking about Iran and a future conflict with Iran. So I think I'll keep that there.
Can I give some solution to? Just, I mean, most of my friends who live in UK and who are progressive minded are from your party. And naturally we have a sympathy with Labour Party. What you all three mentioned, just a suggestion, that okay, Iran nuclear, Taiwan, South China Sea, can't you include CPAC and the views of people of Kyrgyzstan, Pashtuns and Baloch and Sindhis? If Labour Party make this as one of the part,
I would love for them to do that, but I think there are some other strategic aims that the Labour Party.
And of course, I think your question.
I raised the issue several times. They don't bother about it. I raised the issue with Tony Blair.
It's my job to raise it in our party.
I raised the issue with everybody. And even
I would do that. We'll make sure
Jeremy
we get
Corbyn,
that.
who was the leftist, he even didn't do it. When the question of Pakistan comes, they shut up. They don't talk anything. But when you talk about Punjabis, I don't want to say Punjabis are brethren. We are the same people. We're not talking about people.
it's the ruling elite.
We're talking about the mafia, the army, the human shit.
The ruling elite.
Yeah, the elite.
Well, the only representative of the Labour Party we have here is you, so Kamala, you think
Unfortunately, I don't wield power over the Labour Party like that, but I will try my best to make sure that we try and discuss the issue around CPAC, which is why we're doing this event here today, to try and understand what the issues are from, you are also experts in this room, and we're trying to understand what is the general consensus.
And I supported Tulip. Tulip, I nominated Tulip. Otherwise, she wouldn't have got the job.
Thank you.
And she's not raising the issue either now.
Okay.
Because
Not
it's
to get into a debate on this, but let me just finish it by saying this, is that political parties have a lot of sensitivities to consider, yet I do think it is a step forward that someone from the Labour Party has organized this event together with us. The fact that the Labour Foreign Policy Group is a so there are steps being made, and of course we would like them to have been quicker, and we always like things to be quicker. But these might ostensibly look like small steps, but these are big steps, and eventually this will find resonance in these chambers here when we keep talking about this, and at some point in time the Labour Party might include it in their foreign policy making. Brazil, you wanted to say something before I take some more quick question?
Yeah, there's not going to be any pressure, not with so many Pakistani origin Labour MPs who will shut down any such criticism of Pakistan, so that's not happening. And point number two, even if they were not present for argument's sake, Pakistan is able to leverage its role, as I said, as fire starter and poser. It plays that with the West, that either you co-opt with us or there's no intelligence cooperation or sharing on terrorism. So we are in a dilemma, as we've always been since the war on terror began. And this goes back, as I mentioned, to Pakistan's role during the Cold War years too, that we are at the front line telling Secretary of State Dallas during the Eisenhower administration, we are there for you all the way, but it's all talk, it's always been rhetoric. And they do deliver, to be fair to Pakistan, up to a certain extent, it's just peanuts, but they don't go the whole hog.
Okay. And then of course, in order to, how do we counter this, just from my point of view, I would say we counter this by doing this, what we're doing. At some point of time, I also think that the West needs to shed its policy of trying to only intervene in countries in South Asia instead of trying to democratize society, institutional building in the area. And of course, look for democratic partners over there. Like the tragedy for me always with a country like Pakistan has been is that the West has basically supported the army's role in the country and has not pushed for democratization. So okay, we'll talk about that after the conference. That lady is sitting for a while, and then the person next to her, and then the person, yes. So these three, and then we're gonna call it a day. Please.
Hi, thank you for the session. First of all, it was very insightful.
You can't hear.
You're gonna have to talk a bit louder.
Come in the front, yeah. Because we're missing the women, you know. And you didn't mention about the women in Afghanistan either.
Please, let her talk, please.
Yeah.
Thank you for the session. It was very insightful. My question to you is, and I apologize if the question has already been discussed whatsoever, I came in late, my apologies. So, how do you view India, Middle Eastern, European corridor? I think it was recently launched. Would you see it as a counter move to China's BRI, or would you see it as a step towards multipolarism? How do you view it?
Thank you. Yes, please.
To suggestions of key developments that are ongoing and the panel may want to maybe comment on. One is that yes, there have been aid cuts, but there has also been an increase in the budget for the British International Investments Infrastructure funded coming from the UK. Do you think that has been a good development, and would the Labour Party be keen to carry on that? It was the least draft germ of an idea. The other thing was sort of fortunate, I think, term of phrase that Andrew Mitchell put forward when talking about development, that China cut deals with elites while the UK tried to make deals with countries, and that's a deep difference between the way the transactional, very transactional way of dealing with countries or trying to build longer-lasting relationship. Are we making enough of that difference in approach, in communication, and in projecting? So there was a reference to how the G7 funds stuff. Thank you.
And then we have one. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. I'm Jim Peshmar from the International Institute for Strategic question is about the countermeasuring against BRI and the role that Japan can play. In today's newspaper, I believe there was an article that was saying that there was an agreement between Japanese government and the Bangladesh government for Japan to provide some four guardships to Bangladesh as part of the OSA offshore security assistant deal. And I was wondering, how do you assess the effectiveness of Japan providing four guardships to Bangladesh as a countermeasure against China's influence and Chinese BRI policy?
Okay, anyone from the panel? I think the Indian Middle East European corridor, and then we have, of course, a new question, and then Japan's role.
Yeah, I had published on this briefly. It's just this April past. Chabahar and Gwadar are practically white elephants. The Indian deal fell through with Iran. There was supposed to be a highway to Iran also up to Iran. That never materialized due to austere funds, and so the Iranians walked out. And then the Iran, I don't think the Indians are interested in reviving it. Armenia and Azerbaijan are in a mess. The railway lines are supposed to extend out. This goes to the north-south corridor, Bombay to St. Petersburg, which was mooted in 2000, and to date, 2023, only 2 dry freight runs have taken place between Bombay, Bandar Abbas, Baku, Astrakhan, St. Petersburg. So that's complete nonsense as such. Then there was the question also of not just the rail lines, but also with Kazakhstan at the interior side, with Russia now egging on a civil war in northern Kazakhstan and wanting white Russians to secede from there too. So India will have that dilemma to face for a while in Central Asia, and it will not be able to make any impact because the Chinese have pretty much cornered Central Asia for all purposes and intents, not just for markets of finished goods, but also for extracting resources, Kazakh gas, so on and so forth. Then we come to the Bombay-Sharjah line as such, going up to the Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean, where the Haifa port is run by a Chinese consortium. So that was mentioned as soon as this deal was touted at G20. It would still have much more promise than what would have happened through Bombay to Bandar Abbas and the north-south corridor. So there is something to be said for this line, that it could be much more promising. But of course, I'm an Orientalist, I'm not a futurist. So I can only tell you what has happened, not what will.
And I think Israel was also part of this corridor, and today that stands quite...
Yes, and for all China's rhetoric on Sino-Palestinian relations, which, as you know, last week I was mentioning about, Sino-Israeli relations are so strong, economically speaking, much more than even China's relations with its Saudis, Emiratis, and others, particularly on high chip material and agricultural technology and the like.
And then there were a few questions about the British investment into development. I don't know who wants to take that.
Could you repeat the question? Actually, I'm not sure I could got the question.
Yes, one of these process changes today was basically cut lateral aid and recapitalize the British International Investment Development Bank. That is, I think, only just about coming up online, and there's a price phased in. Potentially to be a source of funds for investment, infrastructure investment, and sort of slightly overlooked as a shift in UK. It's less surely, it's potentially long term.
And that's infrastructure investment in South Asia, or which place?
It's worldwide. Supposedly Indo-Pacific is one of their macro investments.
I don't know about the fund, but my initial reaction would be they can never match Chinese deep pockets. And I would also say that the Chinese don't come with a long list of conditions. They're not so bothered about the human rights, about democracy, about parliament. That's why they're dealing with the Taliban. I think the UK, with all its might and all its history, could never match the Chinese pockets over there.
And I mentioned it also with what happened with Sri Lanka and the US-led investigation at the UNHRC about alleged atrocities actual atrocities, not alleged, which took place during the final phase of the war before the entity was decimated in 2009. And that the Sinhalese army, Sri Lankan army, came down very heavily in the final months and weeks. And one finds these demonstrations continuously on in Geneva with the Tamil diaspora community. And Sri Lanka refuses to have observers or investigation undertaken repeatedly since 2009. And lo and behold, suddenly Beijing comes out and says, yes, they're quite right. And the Chinese embassy in Colombo has been firing off these sharp rebukes to everyone, including Washington and others, that you have no business to interfere. If anything, you ought to be playing a constructive role by helping Colombo get back on its feet instead of these distractions and so-called niceties of human rights. And to quote where it mentions that Sri Lanka can undertake progress and development on its and turn the corner, by human rights as it perceives it, which tells you what the symbiotic worldview is of how China perceives development, how China perceives human rights, and that China or Sri Lanka or the others don't need lecturing from, well, the Occident on that, and what may be your perceptions of or standards or parameters to be deployed.
Yeah, I think just to add on that, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Madam Bachelet,
there is another parameter on that as well.
Just published a report, I think that was last year, saying that the violations going on in Xinjiang may constitute crimes against humanity. And then the Japan issue, Japan providing, I don't know who wants to take that. Maybe you can do that for Bangladesh.
I was just going to briefly comment on the general question about counter. Just three sort of points that I don't think have been raised. One, I think we should be cautious not to overestimate the amount of leverage these economic relationships give China over countries and their foreign policy. I think there's occasionally attempts to draw lines between BRI investments and outcomes of votes for China in the UN Security Council, and UN Human Rights Council, or the country's position on Xinjiang, Tibet, Taiwan, these sort of core territorial sovereignty claims that China has. And it might just well be the case that these countries don't buy into Western universalist human rights because they are also dictatorships. So I wouldn't say that we shouldn't overdo the amount of leverage that this gives China. As has already been mentioned, we can't compete in terms of trying to outspend them, we can't lower our standards, and what's the point of us doing match for match? We're going to start getting into the bridge building game here. Instead, perhaps focus on the high value stuff, what will go down public health, education. That would be not directly competing, but a different form of competition. And then lastly, not to overstretch ourselves, if China wants to spend money on bad deals, particularly as it goes into tough economic times or more precarious economic times, then that's not necessarily a bad thing for those of us that are concerned about growing Chinese influence.
And then just to wrap up, I had a question to the panel. How do you see, for example, maybe you're the right person to answer, how do you see this thing working out? Because in China, in South Asia, you have of course the elephant and you have the dragon. So how do you see this working out with the West, with India, with China, along with Pakistan and the Taliban, and then you have more and more alignment between India and the US. So how do you see the geopolitical strategy playing out for the West, but also towards the Taliban, Afghanistan, Pakistan?
One of the interesting things that I was going to mention in my remarks is that I talk about Chinese hubris and how I think it's rather premature and counterproductive given India's traditional policy of non-alignment. I think it's pushed a potentially neutral player closer towards America, which is presumably not what Beijing wants right now, given that America is quite focused on pursuing or strengthening or creating partnerships and alliances in the region aimed at keeping Beijing in check. As for what the UK or external European powers, their role, it's more simple, it seems to me, in the maritime domain. possibly because they've got more direct interest with trade routes, and also there's a coalition of other partners in Southeast Asia. Looking at, say, the Himalaya region, it's more tricky given that we're talking about two big players here, India and China. And as I said, India, although it's leaning towards the Americans, still want to pursue a somewhat independent path. And what scope is there for a player like the UK with its limited resources to throw its weight in there? I'm not so sure. I imagine India would want us to support the historical boundaries and claims, but beyond that, I'm not so certain.
Which are very...
Which London does, anyways.
Yeah, and talking about boundaries, those boundaries in this region are so much contested. And we talk about the Durand line and whatnot. Yeah, we could go on long, but I think it's getting late and we only had the room until 10 minutes ago. I would like to thank you very much. There are some pamphlets about papers we have written. You can take that. You can also visit our website and we can have, of course, a chat outside. Thank you very much for coming. And on behalf of the Labour Foreign Policy Group and